Hi, everyone. I'm Maribel Rivera. I'm the Senior Director of Community Relations at ACEDS. Welcome to our CEDS Spotlight, where we will feature ACEDS members who have recently become CEDS certified. Every one of our members is unique, and so are their e-discovery journeys. Today, I'm excited to feature George Socha. George, welcome.
Thank you very much.
George, you just recently got your CEDS certification. I'm really excited for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We wanted to talk a little bit with you today about the whole process that you went through. But first, could you share a little bit about your e-discovery background and expertise with our audience?
Well, as we were chatting earlier, I do have a little bit of e-discovery background. So when you see me looking up like that, I'm a very visual person, as the EDRM diagram might suggest. And when I'm looking up at that, it's because I'm looking at a picture in my head to help describe things or see a chronology or whatever. And so what I was thinking about there is that I first got involved in e-discovery probably somewhere between 1991 and 1993. I don't really know, because who was paying attention to those things at that time? And I got involved in e-discovery, not because I had any intention of spending any time doing that, but rather because once upon a long time ago, back in 1972, I took a computer programming class. And then that was my first one, 1973, I took my last computer programming class. In the interim between 1973 and 1991 or 93, I spent my high school years, or way too much of them, writing code just for the fun of it, not with any object in mind. That's what my friends and I did for entertainment. Went off to college where I had nothing to do with computers, off to West Africa where I had even less to do with computers. I was a Peace Corps volunteer there. But coming back from West Africa, spent a few months bicycling through Europe, where I stopped to visit my middle brother, who was in Austria for the summer, sequestered away at a friend's cabin, writing a book called Inside the IBM PC. And I looked at the content he was writing. The machine he was using, ironically, a compact loggable, if that means anything to anybody, and not an IBM PC, and thought, well, the world has changed while I was gone. When I got back to the States, I taught myself how to use those early IBM PCs using WordStar, which was a word processing program long before we got to things like Word or even WordPerfect before that. Wrote an inventory management system for my father's business, sort of to teach myself how to use the computer. And then headed off to law school, where I brought along the computer I had recently purchased, an Apple Macintosh purchased in January of 1984, the same month as at that time, very famous Super Bowl ad for the introduction of the Apple Macintosh. I brought that to law school, used that to write up my papers. And because I had a computer, and because I was very involved in the legal aid clinic, and the reason for that, as a Peace Corps volunteer, I'd worked very much with my sleeves rolled up. Law school, especially at a place like Cornell, in the classroom, it's not a sleeves rolled up type of experience, or at least it wasn't in those days. It was a much more ethereal experience, if you will, and I needed something practical to work on. Got involved in the legal aid clinic. IBM donated half a dozen PCs to the law school. The then dean of the law school, Peter Martin, who, by the way, went on to form the Legal Information Institute along with Peter Bruce, I think his name is, at Cornell, said, we don't really have a place for computers in the classroom, but maybe the clinic can use them. The head of the clinic turned to me and said, well, you have a computer, maybe you can figure out what we can do with them. And I ended up writing a sneakerware matter management system for the legal aid clinic. Sneakerware because at the time you could not yet network PCs together. Came out of law school, took a job at a law firm. They handed me a dictaphone and said, see how technologically advanced we are. I looked at that thing and I thought, well, I can't do anything with this. And I brought my trustworthy Macintosh into the office. I very shortly had a steady stream of senior associates and junior partners come into my office, close the door, sit down, and deliver almost verbatim the same message, which essentially was lose the computer. If you have a computer, you will never be taken seriously as an attorney. You will never be anything other than a glorified word processor and secretary. Well, I didn't lose the computer. I'm no longer a practicing attorney. I guess they were right. But what did happen is that the firm landed what would be the largest set of cases it would ever have. And it was a set of nationwide fight for the company life, toxic tort matters, where we were going to have what we used to refer to in those days as the mythical million, a million documents, or a million pages of documents. No one was ever very clear about that. Because there were going to be so many, and there were, we had more than that ultimately. And it really was a lot for those days. We were going to have someone sit down with copies of those documents, read them, and type information from those documents into a computer, code them. And someone needed to help manage that whole process. And there was a computer involved, and I had a computer on my desk, so I was tapped to help out with that process. That meant that I got to know the people in our IT operations at the law firm I was at. It also meant that I got more and more involved in automated litigation support, worked with tools such as concordance and summation, which were the dominant products in the field in the day before anyone really was thinking, or almost anyone really was thinking about electronic discovery. And then sometime in the early 90s, we started getting the first of our EDiscovery matters. I was tapped on the shoulder. I had a computer. I was working with these tools. I must know what to do about this. Of course, I hadn't a clue what to do with it. One of the very first matters I worked on, we were representing the plaintiffs in that one, which was not typically what we did. We were mostly a defense firm. And I was assigned the task of flying, I think it was to Kansas City, I don't remember for sure, and taking the deposition of the IT director, where I was supposed to find out everything, including where all the dirt and the secrets were, just by asking him questions at one deposition about their electronically stored information, as we call it now. It was, without question, the worst deposition of my career. And that's what got me launched in EDiscovery.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know I guess right after that is when you founded the EDRM model.
Well, a decade later.
A decade later.
A decade later. I was no longer at that first firm, nor at a second one. The first firm collapsed. A group of nearly 30 of us left the first firm to start another law firm. And I was at that law firm through into 2003. Left in 2003 to start an EDiscovery consulting practice. One of the first projects I was asked to work on was one that called for me to do a survey of the EDiscovery market. Who are the leading providers? What are the challenges people are facing, and how much money is involved in this anyway? Mm-hmm. They wanted me to do some things I did not have experience doing and felt I needed to pull someone in to help me out. And I brought in someone I had worked with when I was at that first law firm, right about the same time as I began working on the first EDiscovery projects. He had been the IT director at another law firm in town, They had fired him thinking they had reached technology nirvana and did not need him nor the entire level of staff underneath him. So he was freelance consulting at the time. I contacted him and said, Tom, have I got a deal for you? These folks want me to do a project. I don't know how to do it. They've got a ridiculously short time frame here. We're never going to make the deadline. Their expectations are also ridiculously high. We're never going to please them. Are you in or not? And Tom said, well, with an offer like that, how can I say no? So we went on to do the first of what would be 6 years of the Socha Electronic Discovery Survey. And as Tom and I were gathering data and evaluating data for that survey, we realized that especially when we were talking with folks at providers, but also when we were talking with people at law firms and at corporations, we were getting a common response from people. And that response was some variation of, look, you guys, you just don't understand what e-discovery is. Let me tell you, it's what I do. It's what we do. Those other people, that's not e-discovery. We heard that from people whose primary focus was preserving data, and people who spent their time collecting it or processing it or reviewing it. Each one of them thought they did the one true electronic discovery, and the rest of those folks were, I don't know, posers or something. So we said, maybe it would be useful if somebody sat down and did maybe a one-year project, get together a small group of people to try to answer two sets of questions. One, what is e-discovery? Because obviously there's confusion and disagreement. And two, what are the basic steps involved in the actions people take? And Tom, he has a formal IT background, I don't, said, you know, these things I've worked with in the past called reference models. Maybe we can use that as sort of a conceptual framework. And I said, yeah, okay, and we're dealing with electronic discovery here. So how about we call this thing, you know, for want of a better name, the electronic discovery reference model, and that's a mouthful. So let's just say EDRM. And that's where we all started. We sent out a call for participation to folks we knew. Had, I think, 35 people show up for our first meeting in May of 2004 in St. Paul. They arrived at the meeting and said, okay, it sounds like you all are doing something interesting, but we don't really understand what you're doing. So why don't you explain to us why we all are here? And that, of course, lasted for a lot more than 1 year, became the EDRM that so many people are familiar with today, and as well the diagram that many people use without even knowing that there's such a thing as EDRM out there.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that. Given that whole experience, everything, I mean, that's decades of work and decades of dealing in law firms and litigation. What made you decide this year to become certified in e-discovery?
Well, you know, after I took the bar exam in whenever that was, 1987, I said, I am done with that type of test. I am never taking that type of test again. And I have been steadfast in my resistance until this year. And really the primary reason I sat down to prepare for and take that test, all the while worrying, and what if I fail, was that
we would have had to talk to you if you failed.
That's right. You would have had to have a discussion with me. The reason I went through the materials and then took the test is that ACEDS has a newly reformulated and revived global advisory board. And one, at the meeting at Legal Week, we were asked, please all to try to make it a priority. That was part of it. The other part, though, is as I thought about what it means or should mean to be a member of a global advisory board like that, I thought, well, I really should see what the materials are like for preparing for the test. And I really should go through all of those and take the test or the sample test and take the test itself, because otherwise, I don't really understand one of the key things that ACEDS does, and how can I be a productive and useful member of the Global Advisory Board if I haven't done that. So that is what finally prompted me to agree to back off my 30-plus year opposition to taking any further tests like that and sit down and go through that exam.
Well, thank you for taking that. And I know you're newly appointed as part of the Global Advisory Board, but you're also a chapter leader for our Twin Cities chapter. So that is doing that as well, becoming CEDS certified, I think is a really great thing for the chapter, just to see that their leaders are going through it.
And we had a call. We've got monthly calls for our chapter. We had our monthly call last week, I think it was, maybe the week before. The days run by, right?
Yes.
They all combine. And one of the topics of the discussion, I said, at the Global Advisory Board meeting, one of the suggestions was for as many of us as could to see if we could become CEDS certified. I frankly don't know how many people in our local board are that, and do we need to take that on as a task for ourselves? Well, it sounds like almost everyone is already. Mm-hmm. So we've got a few people, 2 or 3, maybe just 2 who aren't yet, but we're largely there locally at least. So I guess we're ahead of the curve once again here in Minnesota.
Excellent. Well, that's great to see. And I think we're starting to see more and more of our chapter leaders looking at the EDiscovery Executive or the CEDS training programs so that they can also get CEDS certified. Just given the whole process, what are your thoughts on the certification training, the exam? What's your feedback on the whole thing?
Well, I did not really know what to expect going into it. What I did to prepare was to go to the recorded preparation sessions. I think there were 3 of them. Mm-hmm. A combined 3 or 4 hours of time. Yeah. I forget exactly.
An hour and a half.
I watched all of those. Yeah, watched all of those. And then I also, there are available from the same site. It's essentially its own little website. You can watch the recordings, which I did. You can participate in live sessions, which I didn't, mostly because of scheduling challenges. And because this was the time I had available to look at those recordings did not match up with the time of any live sessions. And I figured, well, here's the time I can do it. So this is what I'm going to do. I went as well to the various materials that can be downloaded, and at least skimmed through those to get a sense of what was in there. And then, and I think it's a very useful piece of this, there is a version of the test, a much shorter version, that you can take on your own. And it has the advantage of letting you know right away if you get a wrong answer, A, that the answer is wrong, and B, it helps you figure out a bit of what you got wrong with the answer. And then at the end, you can see what your score is and how you did on that test as a percentage as compared to what you're going to have to do if you want to pass the overall test. I did well enough on that test that I said, you know what? I think I'm just going to schedule a time, go in, take the test, see what happens, cross my fingers, and hope I don't have to slink away with my tail between my legs for having failed the thing.
Well, that's good. So what advice would you have for someone preparing for the exam right now?
I think it's, if you will, kind of a sliding scale, because my impression, at least from going through the materials and from taking the full exam, is that it really is intended to have two audiences, if you will. There are those people who have more of a legal background, so that they were practicing lawyers, practicing paralegals, and the like. And then there are those people who have more of a technical background. They're the people running the tools. And they're going to have different areas of experience and different areas of expertise. And then there's some of us who are going to have spent quite a bit of time in both worlds. And for me, I've spent a lot of time in both worlds. Both sides of that, the content in there was quite familiar to me already. If you go through those recordings or go to the live sessions, if you go through that sample test and you understand the content presented, there's nothing new, no surprises, no areas where you're going, wait a minute, I don't really understand that. You go through the sample test, you do well, I think you're ready to take the exam. If, however, you go, well, yeah, I get all this about legal holds and those types of things, but now you're talking about how to do preservation of content out of Microsoft Exchange or Office 365, or you're talking about some other technical things and I don't understand those. Well, that's a pretty good indication that you need to learn some more about those areas. So going through the prep materials, going through the test exam, on the one hand can let you know that you're ready to go ahead and take the overall exam. It also can let you know these are areas where you could do something to get yourself more up to speed. That's useful for the exam, of course. It's also useful, however, for your general well-roundedness professionally, because the better you understand both sides of this equation, and the better you understand the different parts on both sides of the equation, the more effectively you are going to be able to accomplish the work you have, no matter where you sit in this process.
I think that kind of leads right into my last question for you is why should those in the e-discovery and legal technology field kind of consider going through the CEDS or the e-discovery executive training program? So is there anything else you want to add on to that?
You know, I think once again, there's no one answer for everybody. Some people, for example, are in organizations where obtaining certifications is something that is important, emphasized, and valued. And if you are in an organization like that, well, this is one more certification that potentially can help you in your career advancement, in your advancement within the organization, help you toward a bonus or whatever it might be. If you're not in an organization like that and you're still interested, part of the value of going through all of this goes back to what I was just talking about, which is that it can help you have a more fulsome, a more well-rounded, a more complete understanding of all of what goes into electronic discovery so that you can be more effective wherever you are. And it can help if you decide that what you want to do is push yourself some and move into areas you're not already experienced with or familiar with. It can give you an opportunity to identify for you some challenges to pursue if that's how you're so inclined.
Thank you, George. Well, that's everything I have. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and spending it with us, and sharing a little bit about you and the whole process of getting certified with us. For anyone who's interested in learning more about becoming CEDS certified, you can visit our website at aceds.org. And George, any last thoughts?
I don't know. Just go forth and do good work out there.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.